Well, good morning. I'm Greg Hodgen, President and CEO of Groendyke Transport, and welcome to our Facebook Live event. Before I talk about what we're going to do, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about me if you don't know much about me. I grew up the son of an Air Force man, started out as an enlisted Air Force, and then became an officer with Officer Training School. My mother was a public school teacher. I was born in Germany and lived a lot of different places over the years before landing in Enid, Oklahoma. Mainly grew up on farms everywhere we moved. I don't think my dad believed we should ever have a barn or fence on the property, so I built a lot of fences and barns growing up. We had 4 horses, Arabian horses, chickens, pigs. I had a milk cow. I milked in the morning and the evening. Fast forward to my first job with Grondyke was at the Denver terminal on Brighton Boulevard in 1989, and I was a wash boy, busted down tires, and did PMs while I was going to college at night. From Denver, I moved to Enid and worked in central dispatch, then became a regional manager, VP of ops, and then president and CEO. So I've been with the company about 30 years. So what are we doing? What are we doing on Facebook? Well, we use our app pretty effectively, I think, to communicate information to you, but it doesn't really create a dialogue. It doesn't really allow us to interact with people. So we wanted to do something where we could really talk and get feedback as well as communicate with you. So that's why we're having this Facebook Live event, and it's really more of a conversation, but it helps to understand why it's a challenge in our business. If we had a big factory or an office building where every employee was in it, it's just easier to communicate. But for us, the factory is out on the road. That's where production happens. It just makes it more challenging because we're decentralized. So we're using Facebook. Now, a little word of caution about social media. It does have its strengths, but it also has some weaknesses. It can be a real cesspool of falsehoods and rants, and can be negative, but we hope it can help with this dialogue. It's not really a conversation. It's more like a tennis match where there's a serve and a volley back. So it will have a little bit of a delay. If people put in a question, we may answer it. I think one thing to be aware of is, at least from my perspective, there's a lot of bad behavior on social media. People are rude. They say things they wouldn't say to a person's face. That's not really the interaction we're imagining here. As this goes on, I think it'll evolve. Our plan is to do one of these every month. And if you're not able to see this live, it will be recorded so you can watch it later. And you'll be able to study if we have charts or anything on it that you want to look at. You'll have more time to see that if they're not up long enough here. So the first thing I want to talk about is a survey that we did back in February, and we had reasonable participation. Out of 1,279 total employees, about 809 responses. That's about 63%. While that sounds reasonable from a sampling standpoint, statisticians would tell you that gives you an idea of what's going on out there. For those of you that didn't participate, your voice isn't heard. So it's a challenge. If you don't participate in a survey, we really don't know what you think. So here is an overview of the survey. So you see the 63% response rate. If you look at the key categories that we're measuring, they're being measured against a benchmark. And the benchmark simply means it's looking at all the other surveys of other industries and businesses, including ours. There might be a few other trucking companies in this overall database. And we are compared to a benchmark, comparing ourselves. So whether it's the job, manager, people, organization, we're trying to see, are we better than the benchmark? Or are we lower than the benchmark? And it gives us an idea of where we should try to improve. So there were some strengths that came out of this. You can see them here. In all of these cases, we're above the benchmark. And this is really shows a strong relationship between managers and the people that are doing the work, which I think is outstanding. That's something to really be proud of. The other thing that is important to look at is where are the blind spots? Where are the places where we do not really see the strengths that we want, and there are areas for opportunity, things that we can improve. So you can see here, we're below the benchmark. In some cases, not very much. The dot would be the benchmark. The blue bar would be our score. So you can see in these cases, some were a little below the benchmark, some were almost right on it. But these are areas that are really important to us to improve. So there will be some teams working on this in the future. I think we've already had, Holly, two
workshops with
workshops
TMs.
on this. So by the way, there are some of the Justice League in here and some of our media staff, and they're helping me pull this off this morning, so it's kind of new for all of us. Anyhow, we've had 2 of these workshops. What are they called?
Take action on engagements.
Take action on engagement. So you might actually have a manager ask you, these were all anonymous responses, but in some cases there might have been a specific thing said, well, at this terminal, we have a problem with this, or we'd like to do this. And so we may have managers have talking meetings or talking with a group of people to say, hey, this came up in the survey, what can we do to improve it? So these are the opportunities for us to improve on. That's one of the reasons we're doing this event today. I'm planning to spend about the next 10 minutes talking about 2 topics that I think are of interest. And then the rest of the time, and we're assuming this will take about 30 minutes, I will answer questions that you've sent in ahead of time or you type in now. We'll try to pick the broad questions first, go from there. If there's a very specific or individual matter, we will get your information and probably discuss that offline and stick to the broader topics. So, first issue, this is really an interesting one this year. Current conditions in the trucking economy today, which we typically call market conditions, are absolutely torrid. It is amazing. Coming out of the pandemic, customer demand is very high, and we really can't cover everything. There's some markets where there just isn't enough capacity in any trucking company, particularly in bulk trucking, to cover all the freight. It's no surprise, for a long time, the hunt for talent has been a challenge, but this year it's unbelievably hard. There are a lot of reasons for that. There's a frenzy, almost a feeding frenzy of change, and you're probably inundated with it, where people are talking about pay packages, big bonuses, whether it's a hiring bonus or retention bonus, all kinds of promises. We'll give you a new truck. We're going to do whatever. We won't make you go to the Northeast. Almost anything you can imagine. I'd like you to stop for a minute and consider this. How realistic are these offers? You know, we make big pay changes, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit, how we have compared to the market over the last 21 years. But we analyze every possible thing we can before we make a pay change. Why don't we just match everything out there? Why do we actually do a study? The biggest reason is we want to make sure what we do is sustainable. It doesn't do any good to give you a pay change during this frenzy and then have to take it back when things slow down, which is typical in truckload carriers. It's not typical in Grondyke and most bulk carriers. I guess I would point out that if an offer seems too good to be true or too outlandish, ask yourself, how can they do it? How long can they do it? It's no secret. All trucking companies have very similar costs. There's no secret room where they can create some savings that will offer these packages. If they're raising pay unreasonably high in one area, they're having to do that at the expense of some other area of cost or expenditures. What is that going to be that's going to get cut? Is it going to be safety? Is it going to be maintenance? Is it going to be equipment purchases? Is it going to be facilities being kept up, benefits? I think you have to ask yourself that question. That's the question I ask. You may see politicians, particularly today, or news personalities talk about wage stagnation. You probably heard that term, how wages haven't kept up over the years. Is that true? Well, I think it might be true in some industries, and in fact, it probably is true in some industries and even some trucking businesses, but it's false at Grondyke. So I'm going to show you why I can tell you that. If you look at comparing our rate of pay and how it's increased over time to just the rate of inflation, most of you have heard about inflation or the consumer price index. This shows the rate of inflation going back to a baseline year of 2000. So if we just said for the last 21 years, how much has the cost of living gone up each year? And there are some recessions in here, we'll point that out in a minute. But how much has it gone up? So over time, you can see there's a fairly steady increase, starting out a little over $40,000 in this case, up to, what would that be, about $65,000? So now, if I ask you the question, how do you think we compare as a company, Grondyke, to the national inflation rate over that period of time? You think we've stayed the same? You think we're behind, or do you think we're ahead? Well, I'm going to overlay the red bar shows our rate of pay in comparison to inflation over that period of time. And I can tell you the numbers, like Holly, you've got them. The CPI went up
45.34.
45.34. Grondyke's rate of pay went up
56.51.
56.51. So you can see over time, and particularly going back to starting in about 2011, after the last big slowdown in 2009, where we lost 25% of our revenue, you can see the rate of pay has far outpaced inflation. Now, what happens in the years whenever the blue bar is higher than the red bar? In other words, our rate of pay did not rise as fast as CPI. Well, that is the recessions I referred to. So we remember the tech bubble and housing bubble in 2001, 2002. So it really took us until 2004 before we caught up and started to surpass the CPI or inflation. Then the recession I just referred to a minute ago in 2009, when we lost 25% of our revenue, pay definitely slowed down then. But since then, you can see it's a pretty substantial increase up to today, and we expect that to continue. So wage stagnation might be true in some industries. It might be true in some companies. It's absolutely not true at Grondyke. Here are the facts. So we've outpaced inflation over the last 21 years. We'll continue to do that, but we do that through study and deciding how much we should pay and how much we can pay. And really, it's how much can the customers sustain that. The second issue I want to talk about is stability. By that, I really mean sustainability. How can we show you and explain that we're a very stable, strong, long-term company? Well, here are some of our strengths. We've been around 89 years. We're still owned by the Grondyke family and only the Grondyke family. The third generation of Gronydykes are now part of ownership. It's the family's identity, their name's on the side of the trucks, and it's the biggest thing they own. We are also the most awarded carrier for safety in the tank truck industry, period, bar none. We won the Heil trophies in 73, 1975, 1990, 91, 99, 2000, 2016, and 2018. And I'll point out in 2017, we were second in our mileage class, and in 2019, we were second. So we're very competitive. That's not just because of how we do things and what our policies are from Enid. That's because of the work that's done in the field, the people that are dedicated to professional, courteous, safe service. That's what our company's been built on. That makes us stable, that makes us sustainable. Customers want to have that kind of service. The other thing about stability is it's important to look down the road. We don't just look at business next week or next month or even next quarter. We look down the road, sometimes years. What sectors do we want to be in? What is shrinking and what is growing? What might shrink more quickly in the future? What businesses will drivers want to be in? What will be the most rewarding work to a driver and to our company? Both of us need to be aligned on that. What businesses are going to be most attractive as far as the quality of life to a driver and to our employees? So I heard a rumor a couple of weeks ago. Anybody want to guess what that was? Because I was pretty worked up over it. We had
about bankruptcy.
Yeah, we had a driver that went to load the loading rack out in West Texas, and we were locked out of that rack. And either there was a sign there, or the person that on duty said, "Grondyke can't pay its insurance. That's why you're locked out, and they're going bankrupt." This is absolute nonsense. It comes up about every 10 years, maybe more often or less. It's kind of like when we heard that we're sold or we bought somebody. There's lots of gossip in the trucking industry, but this is baloney. We have more insurance than nearly any carrier of any size in the U.S. Why can I say that? I know it because I'm active in leadership of our trucking associations. I'm active in the American Trucking Association and the National Tank Truck Carriers. I'm a past chairman of National Tank Truck Carriers. I'm on the executive committee. So I know what other companies are doing. I talk personally to the insurance companies in the U.S. and London every year on our specific insurance. And I do that personally because it's important for them to know how good we are so we get the best insurance we can get. So I know what's going on in the insurance world. So that's just baloney. Our company is absolutely rock solid financially. We have low debt. We have plenty of money in the bank. And we're backed by a family committed to reinvesting in our company. If you just look at the facilities we've built in the last 10 to 15 years, we have built very nice facilities. Every one of those facilities were bought and paid for with cash money, no debt. So bankruptcy is an idiotic rumor. I don't know how to ascribe it to anyone other than either a gossip monger, a competitor, or just an ill-informed person running their mouth. It's just not true. So that's the end of the things I wanted to talk about. I think we have had some questions come in. Some came in before we started, and there may have been some while I was talking. So, do we have questions?
Yeah. Can you talk about why we had why our miles are stretched out for new tractors due to the pandemic?
Yes, I think that's Jay's question.
Jay Wagner, yes, sir.
Okay, so yeah, the COVID year threw a real monkey wrench into our plan. We typically keep trucks 5 to 6 years. And if you recall, if you've been here very long, Jay will know this. We usually had trucks that we would run till 8 or 9 years, even sometimes 10. That changed about 5 to 6 years ago. So our plan was to cycle through trucks between 5 and 6 years. That'd be 550 to 600,000 miles, maybe a little more. And the pandemic really slowed us down on utilization of all the trucks. So we're long on trucks. In other words, we have too many. And when you sell a truck, if you think about it this way, if you haven't put that average number of miles on it in each of those years, when you sell it, you don't get credit for being low miles. There's a market price for it. So we're trying to get a little more life out of these, and we had too many trucks. So we're moving trucks around, putting a few more miles on those. This year we will not replace a lot of trucks. We did have to buy a few trucks, but we'll be back to our normal cycle next year and should be back on that 5 to 6 year cycle. So hang on, Jay. There'll be trucks being moved around, and new trucks will be coming next year. Another question?
Are there any plans to increase the company's yearly vacation accrual amounts?
I don't know what the final answer will be. The town office, Grondyke town office, is what our HR department is studying vacation time, personal time off. Am I missing anything?
Possibly bereavement as well. Yeah.
And is going to have a policy change announced, and it would come out for next year.
Early 2022.
Early 2022. Another question?
Are there any plans to increase the maximum speed of our trucks?
This comes up a lot. Absolutely not. I hate to sound so definitive. That probably sounds really mean, but our value is around safety. We have insurance companies that believe in what we do. We believe 65 is a safe speed limit, and we don't have any plans to change that.
Very good. Are you guys seeing any other questions pop across? We're not seeing any others on the feed.
No other questions?
I think that's it for now.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize a little thing. Well, I'm actually going to show you something that we'll come to later. Is this chart up?
I can put it up. There you go.
I get a lot of questions about the health plan, and I just want to show you a chart, explain it a little bit, and then I think we might go more in depth in future Let's Talk episodes of Facebook Live. We made a big change in 2017 to 2018. So the end of 2017, you could see what our cost was. It was about $10,000 per employee. And if we look at how the premiums are divided up, Grondyke pays a little over 60% of the premium. Employees pay about 40% of the premium. We made a big change because we were trying to lower the cost to employees. You can see here, the red line was the projected increase from 2016 out to 2021. So if we looked at every year how much the plan increased, if we just said if it increased just like that, the same rate out to 2021, what's the plan going to cost each employee, Grondyke and the employee together? Well, you can see that was really going up fast. We have lowered that cost significantly in 2018, 2019. It's crept up a little in 2020 and 2021, but it's still not matching the slope of that assumed line where we thought we were going to be. So there are very positive things there. I'll talk more in depth about this because I think this is something that every household thinks about. What do they need for insurance and what's the cost of that insurance? And I think we can cover that in a future Let's Talk episode. So just to summarize, we're going to try to do this every month. We're going to do this every month. And the format may change a little bit. We'll probably get feedback from you. We'll look at how well it worked this time. We will probably have some topics that we've either heard about or things that I want to tell you, or that someone from the Justice League, the Justice League is our senior management team, wants to talk about. We'll probably have some of those people step in and be on camera so you can meet them and hear specific answers to questions that might be in their area of expertise. If you have questions in the interim, I think there's a way. Is there a way to submit questions on the Facebook page? Okay, so if you have questions, please submit those. If for some reason you can't, call the talent office or someone here in Enid, and we'll get your question written down and see if we can address it in the next session. I'd also like to remind you, we put out a message about our commercial activity. In other words, what are we doing with rates and in the market. Joe Morrissey he's our chief commercial officer. He did a short video. I did a follow-up at the end of it. That is on LinkedIn. I believe it's also up on our Facebook page.
Yes.
It is.
And as Holly and I were talking about at the beginning of this, we're starting a series of take action workshops to cover items that came out of the recent survey. So you may hear more about that. They may have already started those at your location. So please take time to participate in that. That's how we're going to improve things, is getting good feedback from the field so we can tackle issues together. So thank you very much for attending today. If you're watching this in a recording, I appreciate you doing that as well.
We have a question.
We have a question
we
that
have a
just
question.
came in.
All right.
The question is there any conversation about increasing 401k matching?
There is conversation about it. I think what we have determined is right now we want to tackle pay first, and we've done that for drivers particularly. We already did one round of pay increases, and we'll look at the remainder that weren't in that first group very quickly. I think we're ready to roll one out in the middle of June. And then I think if we need to, we'll look at 401k. But at this time, we don't have any plans to, but it is under discussion. But pay is coming first.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.